So far in this course, we've talked a lot about harmony and we've talked a lot about texture, but we haven't talked really at all about melody. But we've been preparing for it. In our discussions about texture, we've been working from something that's very simple, a rhythmic, homophonic passage, a chorale texture, let's say. And we've elaborated that. We've been able to transform it into, well, a piano accompaniment or into even a three-voice polyphonic passage. Well, working with melody isn't really very different. What you often find is you start with a core set of notes and that you decorate these, you elaborate on them through the use of non-chord tones and through the use of rhythmic patterns. What I want to do in this video is start with something very, very simple. We're going to start with what's called a two-voice counterpoint. One note in the left hand, one note in the right hand, over 9 measures, and only one note per measure. And from this extremely simple thing, we'll create or transform it into an entire phrase for solo instrument and piano accompaniment. So this is where we start. 9 bars of what we call two-voice counterpoint. Counterpoint is this idea. We have a point, and they're counter to each other. They're against each other. If this was species counterpoint, this would be called first species counterpoint. Now, from this, we are going to get a work that is for piano and solo instrument that's in the style of someone like Haydn or Mozart. And even though there's very little here, we already have a sense of what the harmonic progression is. And we can, if we want, use this as a guide for the harmonic rhythm as well. We don't have to, but we will, at least for this example. Let me play it so you can already get a sense of what the harmony is. Not much there, but enough for us to be able to know what the harmonic progression is. So let's put that in here. We're in C major, of course. We have 1. We've got 5. We've got 5 in first inversion. We've got 1, back to 1. By the way, this is a really common way to start a work from the classical era. It defines the key. Usually what we're going to find is there's going to be some kind of phrase or subphrase done with these, which is kind of responded to in these 2 chords. Now we go to 1 in first inversion. To do that actually analysis, I can just put the little 6 there because we know it's 1 because 1 is carried over from here. And this is going to be 4 or maybe 2-6. I'm going to put in 2-6 because 2-6 is actually much more common than 4. So if we want it to have stylistic qualities of that period, it's probably best to put in 2-6. Then 1-6-4, 5, 1. And now you might say, hey, that progression, it looks really easy and I can do that. This can't possibly be a harmonic progression that you find in classical music. It is. This is a really common harmonic progression, and all of the greats used it, and even the not-so-greats used it. So that means we can use it. First step is elaborating the melody. I should say very briefly, sorry, this is a related comment, not so necessary for learning this, but I should say I'd mentioned that this was first species counterpoint. Oh man, if I handed this in as a first species example in a counterpoint class, like for, 16th century counterpoint, I'd probably not do so well, or even one that uses species counterpoint for 18th century style. There's a lack of linearity here and a bunch of other issues. But for our purposes, this actually has a kind of a nice shape, and it's got a climax here of sorts. We'll see if this actually ends up being the climax of the phrase, but at least of this line, there is one. So I just want to sort of say that we're not here doing this so that we can create counterpoint. We're using this as an outline for creating something that's actually homophonic. So they are slightly apples and oranges, and I just want to make that clear. Don't use this as a great example of, how to do first species counterpoint. It's not the end of the world. It's not the worst. It's not an A, but it might be a B or something like that. Okay, so let's elaborate. Now, what we did before when we were working with, say, this homorhythmic, homophonic stuff, and we were making accompaniments, is that we just applied a rhythm. Okay, so let me throw in a rhythm here for this melody of ours. And as we add in a rhythm, that rhythm gives us continuity or coherence. And we should design it so that it connects the dots, so to speak, our points. So I'm going to do this just to get it out there. Something very simple. And like I said, I wanted to have something that this is kind of a subphrase, and this is going to respond to that. So this rhythmic design will just basically be copied here. So let's do that. And now I see, well, this was going down a second, so the neighbor tone made a lot of sense. All right, and it's a neighbor. But this is going down a third, so a passing tone probably makes more sense. Like that. So we get our passing tone. Oh, it's now exploded. I want to throw in something that I've never really seen anybody write about this in a music theory textbook, but I think it's a generally good rule, and you see it a lot in classical music. I mean, you find it in Brahms, and you find it in Debussy, and you find it in Mozart. It's what I call the rule of two. That is, the rule of two means do something twice and then move on. That is, here we've got something, we've got an idea, it's presented twice, now we're going to move on to something else. This is a very common strategy for melodic writing. And it's not just melodic writing of this late 18th century period. It's also, you find it 19th century, late 19th century, even early 20th century. And, that's not an official thing, by the way. I mean, again, don't go on don't start Googling rule of two, because something else might come up. But and it will have nothing to do with melodic writing. But it's just a general thing that you find. So, okay. Now, so following the rule of two, I'm going to make something new here. And I feel like I'd like to have a little spring into this, because this is just going from 1 to 1 in first inversion. So if I get a little spring, and I see, let me see what I can do here. If I spring from this C into this note here, this G, and then I want some figure that's going to go down, because I want to get, actually, ideally what I want to do is this. I want to get back to this thing so that I can do that and spring into this, so this will also be like this, and then I can go down and land here. And again, rule of two, we're going to do it twice, and then we're going to go and do something else. So up, and I'm figuring that this would make sense. Something like this, and a passing tone. And this is just a little bit of I have to say it's just a little bit of noodling about. We get that. And we do the same thing, but only so that we may redesign it a little bit so that we can land comfortably on this note. And now, what I'd like to do is really elaborate this with some kind of arpeggiation and scalar thing. I want to show you, what I really want to do is at the top here, I want to do an arpeggio and get all the way up here. And when I get to the top, I want this E to be there. So I want to get to that E there. So how do I get there? And so then you have to reconfigure this a little bit. You might have, or you might have to. Because look, if you do this, boom, well, you get there a bit too early. You want to land here on that E. So it's not going to make a lot of sense to do like this. If we do that, we're missing the C, because we want the C in the arpeggio as well. So we've got to think, how shall we do this? Well, actually, if we shifted this all up, it's kind of nice. We get this up to the G, then back down, then the C going up to the A, back down. So how about if we actually had more than just a step up, we had a leap, and we did that. Like that. Ah, good. And that gets us all the way up to this note. And we're going to do this. We're not going to land on the downbeat here on this D. This D is going to come later. We're actually going to land on it there. Like that. So we get this scale going down. And then we want to hearken back to this thing. And then we get that. And I see that I've designed this way, this slurring it so that it leaps there doesn't make any sense. So we'll slur it the way that would be common. Well, I guess you could do this. Something like that. Okay, all of this basically is an elaboration of that simple structure that we saw. Let me play this so you can hear it. What I want to do now is shift to a different manuscript paper, which has this melody written in, and now we're going to add in the accompaniment.